So this one's going to be a little bit different for those of you who have attended our Exemplifies before, because normally it's me introducing the speaker, and today I am the speaker, so it's all me today. So I am excited to bring you today the heightened importance of employee wellness, which is a really big passion of mine, and hopefully everyone leaves today with some nuggets that they can take away either for your team or for yourself, or a little bit of both. So for those of you who have not attended any of our Exemplifies before, when I've introduced myself, my name is Melissa Maloney. I am the Chief Operating Officer at Select Path, Benefits and Financials. So excited to bring employee wellness to you today. I also, I wear a couple hats. I have a couple side projects that I do that are passion projects of mine. One is Happy Leader Enterprises, where I do a lot of focus on employee wellness and engagement within the workplace, as well as running a women's series called All Women Lead. So those are just passion projects that I have as well. But I was excited to be able to bring a talk to you today that I did in the summertime for a group of HR professionals, just about the shift that's happened in employee wellness since the pandemic. So that's going to be really the focus of what we talk about today. This CDC quote is, to me, a really important quote, and it kind of sets the stage for what we're going to talk about. So when we consider what's happened in ultimately the last 3 years, the quote's really powerful, because as home and work have really melted together in unique ways, we learned we could work remotely, but the reality is we're still seeing increased stress for so many people, whether that's financial stress, mental stress, physical stress, all of the things that have sort of built up and happened over the last few years. But what we know and what remains true is that for most people, about half of their waking hours, Monday to Friday, are spent in the workplace. So there's this huge opportunity for us to really look at how can the workplace play a significant role in either our health or our unhealth of the employees that work with us. So that's really the basis. So the next slide that I'm going to show you is a slide from a presentation. We've edited some of the images for today, but it's a slide from a presentation that I would run pre-COVID. And so this was a slide, this was a slide where I would essentially put all the responsibility of, if you're not getting everything done, and if you're stressed out and overwhelmed and all of those things, that was a you problem. And this was the language that I would use, where I would talk a lot about how things were impacting us and telling people to take control and ownership. And it was it was just a very different feel. And I read the slide now, 2.5 years past the start of what we've all experienced. And it actually, I scare myself a little bit, because we've really sort of shifted our intention and our focus from this we can all do it, we have 168 hours in a week, to maybe we need to have a little bit more self-compassion. Let's take some breath. Let's step back a little bit and really consider what does wellness look like? How do we do wellness in a different way? And so that's really sort of I want us to sort of compare, as we go through things today, what we used to do to compare to what now is, because it really has started to shift. And so when we think about life-changing moments, we can all reflect back to those moments in our lives that were life-changing. Maybe it was a major surgery, a major accident, losing someone important. There are these moments in life that are critical, and they change how we act, they change how we think, they change how we respond. And that's really what has happened. The pandemic has led us to this change. The world is not like it once was, and how we respond to things is different. And this is one of those moments that happens that leads to significant impact and change. And so that's really why there's this really huge increase in that importance of why should we be looking at employee wellness now, and what does that look like? So if we think about where we're at right now and what has gone on, we know energy levels are lower. We know stress is higher. And if you really think about the state that we've all been in, we have been in this sort of reactive state where we've been on high alert every single day for a couple years. And that has a significant impact on us. It leads to obviously stress higher than ever. It leads to burnout. It's led to some mental health crisis, which I think we can all see in our communities and potentially within ourselves. And so I really want to challenge you to meet yourself where you are or meet your team where they are, because the difference between what I used to talk about versus what I talk about now is really the stimulus. So in past years, pre-pandemic, that stimulus was really controllable. We had a lot more control over how our world happened. We were distracting ourselves. Social media was like all over us. And there was all these things that were getting in our way of the ability to be productive. Now we're actually having a physiological response to the fact that we've lived in this state of reaction for a couple of years. And we need to practice self-compassion. We need to recognize that this new state of reactivity, most of us haven't really experienced anything like this before. And now that we're starting to see these really high debilitating levels of stress, it is that constant of negative stimulants that we can't necessarily get away from, and it is having an impact on our total well-being. So I want to talk a little bit about chronic illness, and I apologize for the US stats. It's just they're way more accessible. With understanding the impact of stress on the body is the first step into understanding why we should care. So when we think about stress, it has a really significant impact on our physical well-being, because, like, again, pre and post. Whenever we would talk about wellness, it was very much about physical wellness, right? It was about eating right, exercising, all of these things. But what we know is there is a significant connection between mental wellness and your physical wellness. So right now, because of stress, lack of sleep, and all those things, there's a really significant impact on our nervous system. So by understanding that mind-body connection to the impact, it will help us, because obviously physical health is one of the greatest indicators in terms of eliminating chronic illness and staying well. So when we think about what we're seeing right now, from an employer standpoint, we are seeing increased sick days, less productivity, increased turnover, more time off, and just in general, increased costs associated with healthcare. Those are the things we've really started to see. So now more than ever, caring about our people and caring about ourselves are really going to drive the results that we're looking for. So when we think about the nervous system, right, it plays a role in essentially every aspect of our health and well-being. It plays a role into our breathing, our thinking, our remembering, our how we feel emotion, our sleep, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That nervous system is a key component. And there's two parts to the nervous system that impact this. We have the parasympathetic nervous system and we have the sympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system impacts the body's fight or flight reaction, right? So if we go to super simple ways, this is your body's essentially cave person response to stress. My body naturally tries to preserve me and save me. It's an instinct that the body naturally does. Well, what happens? We've been in a constant state of stress for 2 years. So we've essentially been in this state of fight or flight for 2 years. Well, what happens when that happens? Our heart rate increases. Our glycogen turns into glucose. So if you're a person who has gained weight over the pandemic and can't seem to get it off, there's a reason for it. It's essentially creating food stores so you can respond to the attack, right? If you're being chased by a bear. And all of these things are happening to us because we've been in a sympathetic state and haven't had enough time putting ourselves into that parasympathetic state. So the parasympathetic state is essentially referred to as your rest and digest, or it's your recovery response. So in that parasympathetic state, it slows your heart rate, it stimulates the stomach and digestion responses. And if you think about one of the greatest indicators of health, it is your resting heart rate and how quickly your heart rate recovers from being high to dropping back down to resting. And so when we control these things and when we put ourselves in that sympathetic state, our things like metabolism are controlled and react better, our breathing rate is better, and it helps you stay relaxed. So when we don't spend enough time in that parasympathetic state, we have increased risk of cardiac disease, stroke, migraines, lesser emotional and overall health and well-being. So these are all the things that happen when our bodies are in a state of stress. So there's even research and work that you can do that if you're in a state of high stress, that if you do high intensity exercise, while you're in a state of high stress, you're adding more stress to your body. So there's actually a lot of science behind when your emotional stress is high, that you should actually decrease your physical stress and do things like light walking, yoga, meditation, breathing, all of those things that will just take your body back down. Okay. So when we think about stress, we often hear things about the fact, that there are different types of stress. There's good stress, which is EU stress or EU stress. And that is stress that helps us. So when we hear not all stress is bad, that's ultimately what's being referred to. So eustress typically refers to challenges that put pressure on us to grow and improve. It's the stress that feels motivating and exciting. So it's not defeating, it's not overwhelming. So it could be things like sometimes exercise is good stress on the body. Starting a new job could be good stress. Traveling could be good stress. Even something like as simple as a roller coaster, right? It's that, oh, panic in the belly, but I'm excited about it. That's that good stress. So yes, ultimately some stress is good, okay? However, distress is what we think of when we actually think of stress, right? This is the stress, whether it's chronic or acute, that keeps coming at us and causing a physical response from the body. So I often describe it in two different ways. Either it's a whole bunch of darts coming at you. So it's like dart, 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 and it's just little tiny hits constantly. Or it's one big hit that just comes at you really hard. And so that's ultimately how I describe the acute stress versus chronic stress. So acute stress is that wham, right? Where it just gets you. Short-term stress caused by an immediate and usually sudden hit. We don't typically know it's coming and it just kind of catches you, right? It's the stuff that doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it throws you off. So a good sort of example of this would be potentially an argument with a loved one, or something along those lines, where you feel that physical response you have in the body, right? Body gets tight, we react to it. But our bodies naturally are actually pretty good at responding and dealing with this type of stress. We want to pay attention to it, but for the most part, we can process those big hits okay. It's not necessarily easy, but we move through them. We can tend to get our emotional brain to react faster than our rational brain in those. So what tends to happen in those situations is our emotional brain always takes over first, because that's what happens every single time. We always feel before we think. It's just how brain activity works. But we can typically bring our rational brain in, and we can work towards moving through that stress. The reality is with chronic stress, though, this is the stress that we tend to live with, right, over a longer period of time. So when you think about chronic stress, that's those darts. It's just stuff coming at you all the time, and it's just kind of always there. Maybe a dart gets stuck in you and you can't get it out, right? It's that constant, it's just coming at you. And so this leads to more physical health challenges, chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety, all of those feelings. So chronic stress tends to be connected to negative habits of thought, and those darts just seem to keep coming. So sometimes they're not even significant things. They're just things that there's always something. And that really catches up to us. That really catches up to our reaction to things, but it also essentially forces us to not get into that parasympathetic state that we need to bring the levels of calm back down. Okay. So when we think about how do we manage stress, so a couple things for you to just consider, right? So be aware. So consciously recognize when you're feeling stressed. Because if we can take a couple minutes each day to recognize I'm feeling stressed right now, that puts us in a position to be able to move out of it and change our mindset from around it. But if we are always go, 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 that's when we tend to not even realize it's hitting us. And again, some of this comes back to how we work, and it's individual. I tend to be somebody who doesn't reflect a lot on how things make me feel until it's a really big feeling. But then other people tend to can be the exact opposite, where they're reflecting constantly on how things make them feel. And neither one is right or wrong. It's just we have to take that time to reflect and recognize when we're feeling stressed. When we do that, we can pause. We can give ourselves that moment to think before we react, and try and allow our rational mind that opportunity to contribute, as opposed to just going with the feeling. We then get perspective. We look at what's happening. We try and put it into context, focus on facts. Again, the facts versus the emotions. And then that puts us in a position to be able to plan, to think about and ask that rational side of our brain what we can do to change the dynamic and look for some practical actions. So since we know that people are more stressed out now than ever, we know that people are spending more time working. This really gives us that opportunity to, in the workplace, make an impact on this, right? We have the opportunity to do what's right and make people's lives that little bit better. And it will ultimately create that better workplace, but also create more peace of mind for the employees. So we're going to go through a few things of how do we actually do that. So like I've said a couple times, physical health is not enough at this point. That used to be the conversation. It used to be, get people a gym membership, go to the gym and work out. And that's not necessarily where we're sitting. Knowing that people are at this increased stress level right now, we have an opportunity to make a change. So the conversation needs to shift from physical health to well-being. That well-being is a combination of physical, mental, and spiritual health, all things combined. And so that's really what we're looking to do, is how do we actually increase wellness and shifting our thoughts away from wellness is working out. Okay. So what is wellness? I'm a big believer in we simplify this. I spent a lot of years in my career working and trying to get people to exercise more and playing sort of that side. And I think we overcomplicate it. I think and that overcomplication really can lead to an increased level of people resisting. So I'm big on eat real food, move every day, try and sleep 7 to 8 hours a night, and make sure you drink lots of water. If we can accomplish those things, we're doing pretty well. I used to say to people, I actually don't care what people do for physical fitness. They can jump on the spot for 20 minutes a day for all I care, because it's still moving your body. Should I do squats? Should I do cycling? Should I go for a walk? Should I hike? Move your body, right? Movement is key. Stand up more. Don't sit as often. Simple stuff just to start to make easy changes towards wellness. We know right now, again, American stats, apologies, but less than 2.7% of Americans actually accomplish these 4 things. So we're okay if we're above the crowd if we can accomplish them even 3 days a week. So I want to challenge your thoughts around self-care. So again, pre-pandemic, the solution for wellness at work tended to be very individual type solutions. Things like gym memberships, things like, things like access to different services, but they were all things that I would take and go and do by myself. And what we learned in the last couple of years is that in order for us to be well, we need social interaction. We are social beings, and that is a part of wellness. So we need to shift. Self-care is still a thing, right? But we need to sort of shift that mindset. So there are studies that show that if I'm standing at the bottom of a hill, looking up to the top of the hill, and I'm standing there by myself, that hill seems steeper than if I'm standing at the bottom of the exact same hill, but I have a friend standing beside me. All of a sudden, you throw a friend standing beside me, getting to the top of that hill automatically feels more accomplishable in my brain, because the connection and the social connection that we're going to do it together creates added response to, I can do this. So we want to start to look at how can we, within the workplace and even outside of the workplace, build social interaction, because we just know that our well-being as humans is grounded in attachment and acceptance from others and with others. So we've got to look for ways to connect people back together. So I'm going to shift the mindset from team care or from self-care to team care. So if we can start to shift the mindset from being it's about me to it being a collective solution, and how can we do this together, that allows for a greater foundation of well-being and ultimately team cohesiveness within the workplace. But we can really create a world where people feel less alone and more connected. And it's such a great opportunity for us right now to look at this as how can we grow together? So I'm really going to challenge you to, self-care is still important, but really look for those simple opportunities for team care. And whether you're a leader on this call or an individual on this call, that team could be your family. That team could be you bringing a group of coworkers together. It could be as simple as going for a walk as a group together every day. It could be as simple as having a coffee time every day. Whatever that is, but that social interaction really will help us build wellness. And if we think about it from a remote world, if we are working remotely, it is a little bit more of a challenge. I will not deny that at all. But there are ways to still bring people together remotely. So I don't want us to write it off. So the next thing is managing our 4 energy systems. So everybody has 4 energy systems. And those 4 energy systems are physical energy, mental energy, emotional energy, and spiritual energy. So I'm going to run through sort of the basics of these. I have a lot more information, so you're more than welcome to email me and I'll throw you some afterwards if you'd like. So physical energy, ultimately, our bodies ebb and flow in 90-minute cycles. So every 90 minutes, we need to change our physical state for our body to function at optimal levels. It's as simple as getting up and walking around for a minute, standing on the spot and jumping for a minute. Does not need to be complicated, but we will actually be more productive. We will have more energy and we will feel better if we move at least every 90 minutes. So if we think about the pandemic, I know for myself, I felt within the first couple months how like my hips were tighter, my body just didn't feel good because I was sitting so much more because I was just at home by myself. And so I would just sit at my desk and I would do work. And I hear that from people. But the reality is we're not necessarily our most productive self if we stay in one spot for that long. So that ability to get up and move around is actually really critical. So 90-minute ebbs and flows. Okay. So try and get up every 90 minutes at least. The second is mental. So mental energy, is about focus and prioritization. So when we look at this and think about our energy levels, we want to be able to focus and not be interrupted. And we want to also be able to prioritize the things we do best. The example that I always give is think about, and I use this even when I'm talking to teenagers. If you think about when you're in flow, right? That moment when you're in flow is when you can focus and not be distracted, and you're like in the zone, right? You're working, your brain is going, like you're producing, and it feels so easy. Like it's like, yeah, this is an awesome feeling. That is sort of what we're trying to drive with that mental energy. Versus if you are feeling like you have to get up, it's like, I'm gonna go to the fridge and grab a snack. Oh, I'm gonna go, I'm just gonna throw a load of laundry in. It is, you can feel sort of that difference when you're in flow with a task that you love to do, that you're really good at, that really drives your strengths, versus when you're not in flow and things are really pulling your energy levels down. So you want to keep a close eye on making sure you set time in your day to be able to focus and prioritize on the things you do best and the things that put you in that state of flow. It's never going to be an 8-hour day. We all have stuff we have to do in our jobs that are not necessarily our favorite things, but we want to try and make sure we have a balance of the ability to do the things that put us in that state of flow, and then taking time away to do the things that we just kind of have to do. Emotional energy. Emotional energy is managed through trust and connection. So the example I always use for this is, consider when you are in a relationship, family, whoever, consider when you're in a relationship and you feel a high level of trust. And think about what that feels like. You can tell them anything. You know, you can use candor and it'll be okay, right? It's okay. It's not draining. Versus if you're surrounded by people who you don't trust, or you're in a situation that doesn't feel safe, right? It's sort of that trust and safety side of things. If you're in a situation that doesn't feel safe, you spend a lot of time in those situations questioning things. Why is this happening? What's going on? And there's all these things that go on in your brain. It's exhausting. So those are things that'll pull your energy levels down. So we want to look for, how can we create a workplace that fosters trust, connection, and safety? And how can I be a part of a workplace that fosters trust, connection, and safety? So those are some of the things we want to consider for the emotional health. Spiritual is our why. Right? Spiritual is that connection to why do we do what we do, and it being more than a job, and it actually being something that we bring value to somebody's life. Our job has an impact on people. It is really that connection of, all of this effort I'm putting into work is great because here's the reward that happens based on my efforts. So you really, and there's a lot of energy that can be gained when I feel connected to why I do what I do every single day. So when you think about all of these energy levels, I challenge you, because what we know is almost none of us will let our cell phone batteries run dry, right? We're not going to let them go empty. But for some reason, we're willing to drain ourselves. We're willing to put ourselves in a situation where we're not necessarily our best selves. So I challenge you to pay attention to those energy levels, and just, again, a lot of it is awareness. When am I at my best? When am I not at my best? Am I getting up and moving around a lot? Can I feel the difference when I have meetings with this person versus with this person, right? And really take ownership over managing those energy levels and the thoughts and processes that go along with them. The next is emotions. So we need to make talking about emotions at work okay. And I say, I am a good Gen Xer. I work hard, I leave my stuff at the door, I come in, I do my job, right? That's what we were told as Gen Xers, you leave it at the door. But as the lines for work and home have become blurry for most organizations, we now have kids having a breakdown in the background of our Zoom call, a dog barking while the Amazon guy shows up while you're leading a meeting, right? We've got life and work are not separate entities anymore. Our life and work have merged together for so many, but we also have hit a point where it is actually okay for us to not be okay. And if there is a positive, I guess, that we can say came out of some of the changes that we've seen in the last couple of years, I'd like to believe that's one of them. And that we need to make it safe for people to be able to express how they feel, and that we should be creating opportunities for people to express how they feel. And that it shouldn't be a bad thing for people to be able to initiate that conversation, but that as workplaces and as leaders, for those of us who identify as leaders on the call, even though I'll tell you, you're all leaders, but for those of us who have a team on the call, how are we creating a place that it is okay to talk about how I'm feeling right now? And I open that up as that opportunity to check in. And again, if we think back to what's happened over the last couple of years, we would see posts on social media where people would say, you know, if you're having a rough go, I'm here. I know I had a friend who reached out one day and just said, hey, you're the person I'm checking on this week. Is everything okay? Because she had just decided to do check-ins with people once a week to make sure they're okay. And it's important that it's obviously not lip service, that we do actually care how people are when we ask the question, but creating an open opportunity for check-ins. How are you? Do you need anything? Are you able to prioritize your work right now? Are you able to focus on the things you do best? Do you feel good about what you're working on right now? Do you feel connected to the company? Are there supports that you need more of, right? Those questions that open up the conversation and give somebody the opportunity to go, you know what? I'm just really struggling right now. This has not been a good week. And that's not whining. It's not complaining. It's just the reality. And we have to figure out how to move through it, because if one not good week turns into 5 not good weeks, turns into 10 not good weeks, that's not what we're trying to create. But if we can take one not good week and look for ways to try and change it so that going forward, that not good week maybe is only 4 days the next week and 3 days the week after that, and only one bad day the week after that. Those are the types of steps that we want to be making within our day-to-day to try and make a difference in our own emotions, but we have to be open to having that conversation. So company goals and values. What are we trying to do, or what is your company trying to do from an employee value proposition, right? So if we want to be workplaces committed to wellness, we really need to look at what does that look like? How are we doing that? We can't just put a check mark in a box to say we care about wellness and then not do anything to actually move it forward. So that alignment between what we want and where we want to work. So I'll sort of talk in two tones. If you are a business leader that's trying to create a workplace that is that, then it's really important that you identify what kind of culture do we want to create, and then ask yourself, what are we doing intentionally to create it? If you are a person, an individual working for a workplace, and your goal alignment is critical to you, you should be asking yourself, am I working somewhere where my values align with the company's values? If it's important to you to be able to focus and work on the things that you do best, and you're spending every day not working on things you do best, then that's an opportunity to go, okay, how do I change that? What are my opportunities here? And really, again, it's that opportunity to have open dialogue. And it is something right now that we're seeing more and more of, where we have to step back and really look at it and take some control and some ownership on how do I do that for myself, or how do I do that for my team? Because that alignment is really, really important. The final thing before we do some questions that I wanted to touch on is in general emotional intelligence, but specifically empathy. We are at a point right now where what happens when we're in a state of stress, or especially really high stress, is, like I talked about early, is our bodies go into that fight or flight response. We go into survival mode. It's just natural. It's what we do. We don't even realize we're doing it a lot of the time. We're trying to survive. And when you're trying to survive, we can become selfish, not in a bad way. I'm not saying that as a negative. It's just the reality. In states of crisis, in that state of chaos, survival kicks in. Survival mode means I take care of me. What can happen, and we've all seen it in the last couple of years, what can happen is when I'm so focused on taking care of me, I can sometimes lose that amazing skill of empathy. I don't always consider how is the other person feeling? What is going on for them? What could their perspective be? There's a leadership group, a leadership philosophy that I follow that's called Conscious Leadership Group. And they have a very simple model, and I think it's a great model for life. And it's a straight black line. And the question that they always ask is, are you operating above the line, or are you operating below the line? Neither is right or wrong. It's just you're in one of the places. And when you're above the line, you're operating from a point of curiosity and trying to learn. When you're operating from below the line, you're essentially trying to be right. You've already solved it. You know what you're talking about. And so if we think about that from an empathetic state right now and sort of what we've gone on, I think we can all connect to sort of the divisiveness that we've seen happen over the last couple of years. And we really need to step back and start to consider, how can we bring empathy back? How can we consider another perspective as potentially also being right? How can we put ourselves in a position where there are other options? And that doesn't mean I'm wrong. It just might mean it's different. And I think if we can start to create that sort of level of empathy within the workplace and within our own work teams and within our own groups and even within our own households, that really gives us an opportunity to learn and to grow and to feel better about our own relationships. And again, those social connections come together and lead to incredible things. So helping people develop that ability to think above the line is something that's really important. And your own self, I'm big on just in that self-reflection side of things, asking yourself, am I operating right now from a point of curiosity, or am I operating right now from a point of being right? And that simple shift in mindset can take a lot of stress off of you, because all of a sudden, when I don't need to be right, and instead I can be curious, it changes a lot of the emotion and feeling and stress connected with the decision, and usually can move people through a process a lot faster. So, and I guess one of the stories I'll tell super quick to connect to that is my sister works in healthcare, and she's worked in healthcare her whole career. She works for a couple surgeons. And throughout the pandemic, she lost a lot of her hours because there were no surgeries. So she lost a lot of her hours. So she was struggling to make ends meet. And the doctors who she worked for were being forced to take on some shifts in a hospital to cover like nursing shifts. And they were expressed in front of her their disbelief at the fact that they were going to be paid $200 an hour to do these shifts, because that's below what they would normally make. And it was at a time when my sister couldn't pay her rent. And so it just sort of puts you into that perspective of recognizing who's in the room and realizing, and again, they're lovely people. They take great care of her all the time and have for years, but they just didn't put it into perspective of here's how this is impacting her. And we should be considerate of that. So I really think when we're looking at empathy, we have to step back and consider, how do I meet people where they are in order to move us forward together in that connection and us moving together as one. So that is the end of my official slides, but I'm totally open to questions. What we typically do, again, this is where I'm normally a facilitator and not I'm normally the host. So I'm going to run my own questions today. And it's completely, if there's questions, we stay on till 1:15. If there's not questions, then we wrap it up a little bit early, but I will open the floor to any questions that you have on any of the things that we covered today. And I'm going to actually give you a reference slide as well that's got some stuff on it if you'd like it. But since there doesn't seem to, oh, hang on, is there a new? No, that's not a new question. That was just a thank you. You're welcome. So that's all I have. So thank you guys for attending. I hope that everybody can take something away with it and reach out if we can do anything to help. Thanks, everybody.